I could stand to eat a little less.
Yeah, I could too. But, when the whole world's going to hell, you may as well grab a bag of Cheetos and watch it burn.
There's intro number 2.
Pistols, prayer, and potluck. This is Armed Lutheran Radio.
Hi, folks. Welcome to Armed Lutheran Radio, a show about guns, hunting, competitive shooting, the natural right of self-defense, and what God's Word says about the issues surrounding gun rights and gun ownership. I'm your host, Lloyd Bailey, the Armed Lutheran, and this is episode number 225. Thank you so much for making Armed Lutheran Radio a part of your week. Welcome to those of you who are new to the show. We have our variety show again this week. More about that in a moment. But first, I want to thank the people who made this week possible, the members of what we call the Reformation Gun Club. See, Armed Lutheran Radio, for those of you who don't know, Armed Lutheran Radio does not have any advertising. We are listener funded. And that means that we rely on the monthly contributions of our members of the Reformation Gun Club, who put their money where their mouth is. They value the show, and they value it so much that they actually contribute to it. This week, I want to give a shout out to Paul and Calroy and John and Brian and Robert and Mitch and Frank and Scott and Gavin and our newest member, Tamara. Welcome. And thank you, all of you and the rest of the members, for your support, especially during these crazy economic times. I really, really, really appreciate it. And folks, if you are not a member and are curious or interested, you'd like to support the show in some way, you can join these awesome people for as little as $1 a month. It really does go a long way to help us keep doing what we're doing, paying for hosting and equipment and software. Check out all the benefits and all of the exclusive content that's available to our members. Just go to armedlutheran.us/gun club, and you can find out everything there. I hope you'll join them. All right, so this week is another of our variety shows. For those of you who are new to the show, every other week, but basically what we try to do is we have what we call our Clinging to God and Guns show with myself and Pastor Bennett. And then alternately, we have a variety show with tips and rants and pontifications from Pastor John Bennett and Mia Anstein and Sergeant Bill Sylvia, and occasionally a little bit of a rant from me. This week is a variety show week. We have changed our format recently for those of you who didn't hear the show 2 weeks ago, episode 224. We normally this is a weekly show, but we've had to make some changes to the release schedule because of some water damage that happened to my home while we were on vacation in North Carolina. It basically did $25,000 worth of damage to the downstairs in my home. Just about every room downstairs was affected. And so this house is not livable really unless you're comfortable doing the bachelor kind of college student thing where you're living on fast food and whatever you can put in the microwave. And that's what I've been doing for the last 3 weeks. And I've got 2 more to come, probably. We've got some good news this week. I signed a lease on temporary housing, which will be provided by our insurance. That means that my family, who's still back in North Carolina because we didn't know what kind of shape the house was in, and we didn't know when we were in North Carolina just how bad the damage was or whether there would be a place to sleep for everybody. I spent the first week sleeping in my office while the house downstairs was drying out. Once they got all that stuff done, though, they ripped out all of the drywall and all of the kitchen cabinets, and there's no water in the kitchen, and so you can't cook, you can't wash dishes, So it's not suitable for a family. One person, you can do it, but it's not really suitable for a family with kids and an elderly mom who is coming back to Texas with us. So I left them safe and dry in North Carolina, and Lord willing, and the creek don't rise, as my grandmother used to say, we will all be back together the week of the 13th. So about 10 days away. And then I also signed work orders to get the repairs started that same week. So there's light at the end of the tunnel that hopefully sometime in the next 3 months, we will be back in our house with walls again and fresh paint and new carpet. So we'll see. Big shout out, by the way, to Liberty Mutual for their fast response and how they have responded to all of this. It's been really easy to work with them. And so if you're thinking about changing your insurance, freebie commercial here, check out Liberty Mutual. The emu commercials are hilarious. And the coverage and the customer service is even better. So just check that out. If you are in the market for auto or homeowners insurance, I highly recommend it. Okay, so what this means too is that this change in the release schedule may be coming to an end quicker than I thought. It's possible that next week I may be able to put together a Clinging to God and Guns show with Pastor Bennett, and then the next week will be another variety show, and we'll be back on track. It's more likely that we will not have a show next weekend, and then we will have a variety show the week after that, the week of the 13th. That I guess would be the 19th. I'll have to look at a calendar. And then the weekend after that, we'll be back on track with a Clinging to God and Guns show with me and Pastor Bennett. So we'll either be able to get a show done, a Clinging to God and Guns episode done this week or this next week. So for the 12th, it looks like we might actually get depending on how things go with contractors and other stuff. If I can arrange it, we'll do a show for the 12th. If not, we will have a variety show on the 19th, and then our first Clinging to God and Guns show on the 26th. So in any event, within the next couple of weeks, we will be back on track with a weekly show. So God be praised for that, and thank you all for all of your well wishes and your prayers. We really do appreciate it. So enough from me. It's time to get on with the show, as they say. Kick back and relax. Enjoy content from our awesome cast, and I will talk to you next time. Hopefully next week. We'll see. Thanks for listening.
Time now for Mia's Motivations with Mia Anstein.
Hey guys, it's Mia here, and at the time of recording this week's segment, it is almost Independence Day. It's almost time to celebrate our freedoms, and today I have had several emergency alerts come through on my cellular device, and the updates are COVID-19. Risk of virus transmission and spread is extremely high. Celebrate this holiday weekend at home. Masks save lives. Wear one if you must go out. Protect your family, neighbors, and our state. I don't know if you're receiving similar notifications in your state, but the whole thing, while it makes sense, it doesn't make sense, and there are so many conflicting ideas and statements in that little paragraph that it just is amazing. What I do know is that telling me to stay home and telling me to wear a mask isn't really freedom, but I do understand protecting other people's lives. And with those two things in the same statement, I, as a gun owner, want to be able to protect my life and my family's life, and maybe other people around me protect their lives, and I'm sure some of you want to do that as well. With that being said, we also had elections last week in Colorado, and in my district, we did have a gun-toting mama who won over the incumbent Republican in our district. So that's very interesting because I also carry guns, and listening to some of the voters in our area and people who are on the committees and such, they said there was a very low voter turnout, which I thought was extremely surprising because there is a lot going on in our state, in our county, in our country, and I just really thought more people would vote in this primary than what they're saying did. And as I said, I don't know what things are like in your area, but today, I want to encourage you to prepare for November. And so we've got the primaries behind us. We're headed toward November, chugging along. And how do you find your information on who you're going to vote for? I have multiple outlets, but this being Armed Lutheran Radio, I want to point you toward the hashtag #GunVote. So that's that little number sign, GUNVOTE, hashtag #GunVote. And what that is for gun owners, you used to be able to go to NRA, and I'm sure you still can go there, and they will give you a rating on candidates. And what I have found over the years, or at least it seems to me, you can comment and let me know if you agree or not, but the NRA has kind of gone to a Republican Democrat type of deal, and it's kind of like back in 2016 when somebody said if you weren't for her, then you were a deplorable. And I don't really think that's the way it should work. I think that we need to look at more issues than just one. But if you want to look at the gun vote, you can go to www.gunvote.org and you can find 2020 presidential candidates. You can look at their positions and their quotes on Second Amendment issues. You can also look at people who are running for Senate, people who are running for other offices, and you can see what their positions are on firearms related issues. If you know of friends or family who didn't vote, I would encourage you to start encouraging them to get out and either get registered or encourage them to get educated. You can find voter registration information for your state, and you can find other resources to help drive voter registration. If you go to the NSSF, which is the National Shooting Sports Foundation, go to nssf.wydencollective.com, and you can find a lot of gun vote icons and buttons and information. You can put those on your social media pages. You can check that out and help spread the word that people need to get out there and they need to not risk our rights. And there are rights that tie hand in hand, but the gun vote is one. As I said, I'm talking to you about that today because we're on Armed Lutheran Radio, and it is something that you must care about if you're listening to this show. And you can go and educate yourself there. You can find things that you can share with others, and you can go ahead and pass that along and try to spread the word. Try to get people to stand up and speak up and step up for our rights so that we don't lose more of our freedoms. I hope to talk to you again next time. Have a great one. Happy Independence Day.
You can read more from Mia, watch her YouTube videos, or check out her podcast, Mac Outdoors with Mia and Leah, at miaanstein.com. Time now for another Ballistic Minute with Sergeant Bill Sylvia.
Hey everybody, I'm Sergeant Bill and this is your Ballistic Minute. Today I want to talk to you about moving into a shooting position for IDPA. Now I've seen a lot of people, and I used to be one of these, and I still kind of do it sometimes. I'm still trying to get this dialed in every time I do it and make it a habit. But there's a fast way to do it and an efficient way to do it. The fast way to do it only looks fast. It's not. So what I mean by the fast way is you're running really fast and you're down low and you get into position and you straighten up, might be on your tiptoe on your trail leg, and then you punch the gun out and you shoot your targets as quick as you can. Pop, 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 pop. That looks really fast, but it's not. It's not efficient. And it doesn't matter how fast you shoot. If you do it more efficiently, you'll do it quicker. There are 3 keys to going into an IDPA position that will make you more efficient. Now, first, like I said, you got to go into position with your knees bent and stay low. So those knees are going to be your shock absorbers. They're going to smooth out your landing into that position as you're running into it. It's also going to give you smoother sight picture. And then the last thing you got to make sure you do when you're coming into positions with knees bent, staying low, is don't stand up. And if you haven't noticed this before, you'll notice it now at any match or any match video you watch. You'll see lots of people that'll go into position. They're nice and low, guns up, and then they pop up and they lock their knees out and they shoot with their knees either locked out or almost locked out. They don't stay low. That raising up is basically, in effect, like taking another step, and it's just wasting time. So the second key to getting into position in an IDPA shooting position is to keep your gun up and be on your sights. So a lot of clubs, my home club does this, we use those see-through walls, those, some people call it snow fencing or construction fencing, the mesh type walls. You could see through those walls. So there's no reason for you not to be moving into position with your gun up away from cover so that you can have your gun up already on sight. So as soon as it clears that wall, you're ready to shoot. Now, if you have solid walls, you'll need to find some sort of stage marker. If you're not the first person shooting or the first squad to roll through that stage, you will probably see burn marks on the wall where a lot of people are, up against the wall and their gun, the muzzle blast is charring the wall a little bit, or at least throwing some carbon onto it. You can use that as a stage marker to see where your gun needs to be in relation to that, in relation to the target, the first target you're going to shoot. If you don't have any of those, you need to find a spot on the wall, whether it's a piece of the wood or a defect on the wood or paint chip, or if it's a metal wall, whether there's a scrape on it or just something. Maybe if it's a mesh wall that's, mesh, but it's got a solid backer, you find a certain spot on that mesh that, you can use as a reference point, as a stage marker, so that you know where your gun needs to be in relation to that first target where it's going to be. Now in IDPA, you can't have your gun out on your walk through and get it exactly, and you can't even air gun, but you can hold a hand up in front of yourself, your arm up with your hand out in a fist, or actually I usually do it with my hand, all fingers extended down like I'm pointing at something with all my hand fingers extended almost like a salute, and that way I can kind of approximate where the gun's going to be so I can find a stage marker. And the last but definitely not least thing you need to do when you're going into position for IDPA is don't crowd cover. When I say don't crowd cover, I mean don't be sucked into the wall and then, you think you're getting closer, so you're going to extend your arms past the wall so the shots aren't as far. That's just silly. You're saving like a foot, maybe 2 feet, maybe even a yard, and that's nothing. If your shooting abilities are that low that you cannot back up 1 yard or 1 step or a couple feet and shoot the same target with the same ability, then you need to work on your shooting ability and don't worry about this moving into position tip. Okay, so don't crowd cover. Keep a step or two back from it. You need to be able to have your gun all the way to full extension as you're coming into your last couple steps, and it's not hitting the wall. You've got room, you've got space in case, you've got a little bit of room so that if you're a little bit close, you're not running the gun into the wall or whatever. And then if your fault line is angled, if it's angled out, like say you're coming into position on your left, on the left side of a wall, and the fault line is angled outwards or even straight back, most of the time, if you crowd cover and you're up against that wall and up tight on that fault line, it's going to take you longer to see the sights. It's just basic geometry, people. If you take a couple steps back and then you look at it in your walkthrough, you'll see that the target will appear a little bit sooner than it would if you were up crowding cover up close on that fault line. So you want to give yourself some space and use all of the fault line that you can because it benefits you. And if you don't believe me, you could try this in dry fire or live fire. put a piece of tape down, set up a target, put it through a doorway down the hallway into another room or something like that. Or I do it from my bedroom into my bathroom. And I actually have a furring stick that doesn't have any staples in it that I have. But you could put a roll of, like a strip of painter's tape on the floor and use that as your fault line and get up close to where you see this target and come into that position and see when you can see it and put it on a timer. And then do the same thing, but come about 2, 3, 4 feet back and tell me you don't see that target sooner. And that's the key to shooting faster and more efficiently. You have to be ready to shoot sooner. If you do these 3 things, keep your knees bent, stay low, keep your gun up and on the sights as you're coming into position, not when you get there, before you get there, and don't crowd your cover so you've got room and you can see the target sooner, you'll be shooting faster. Your stage times will come down and people will just say, wow, you just shot that stage so smooth. I can't believe you did it so fast. It's because they don't realize that you're being more efficient in the way you run the stage. So keep practicing. I'm Sergeant Bill. This has been your Ballistic Minute.
Sergeant Bill Sylvia is a veteran of the Dallas Police Force and a masterclass competitive shooter. You can check out his YouTube videos at armedlutheran.us/Sergeant Bill. It's time for Pastoral Pontifications with Pastor John Bennett.
Well, this is the pistol-packing padre himself, Pastor John Bennett, and you are listening to another segment of Pastoral Pontifications. Now, if I was to give a title to this segment or a theme to this segment, it would be doing the right thing, even when it's the hard thing. I had a perfect teaching moment with my kids this past week. We had a stray dog show up in our yard. Sadly, where we live in the middle of nowhere, for some reason, when people decide to dump their animals and abandon them, they choose here. It happened once, maybe about 10 years ago or so, where 2 very nice dogs were dumped off in this area. They had no one to care for them, and so I took them to the animal shelter, and there they were well cared for, and they were adopted out to be somebody's pets. And for this dog that showed up, he was an older dog, just a very incredibly sweet dog. My kids, within 3 hours, they fell in love with this dog, and they absolutely bawled their hearts out when we went to drop him off at the animal shelter. They were begging and pleading, please let us keep this dog. And it was a very hard thing for me to do as a parent, because what parent enjoys seeing their children cry when their hearts are so set on something? Wonderful dog. He would have been a great addition to our family, but he was an older dog. We didn't know his health history. We already have a dog who doesn't always get along with other dogs. And so we thought the best thing for this dog was for him to find a good home, someone who needed a companion, someone that could be as much of a blessing to this dog as this dog could be a blessing for them. It was a hard thing to do. But in the end, our kids realized this was the right thing to do. Now, this ties into, with what our nation just celebrated yesterday, Independence Day. And if you're one of the Gun Club members, you're getting to listen to this probably on the 4th of July. Our nation's independence, as we celebrate it, it was all achieved by doing the right thing, even when it was the hard thing to do. We are a relatively free nation. Now, granted, it seems as if our liberties are being trampled on day by day and our rights infringed upon, and of course that is upsetting to us. But at the same time, we are still relatively free. Take, for example, this podcast. There's often times where we clash with the politics of those within positions of power in our country. In many countries, a podcast like this wouldn't be allowed to exist, and yet, thanks to our rights, in particular the right to the freedom of speech and the freedom of expression, you're able to listen to this at this moment. But these freedoms that we enjoy, they came at the cost of the literally millions of men and women who have, in the past nearly 250 years of our nation's history, decided that instead of doing the easy thing Instead of avoiding conflict and avoiding service to their country and to our nation's armed forces, instead, they decided to do what was the right thing, even when it was the hard thing. Now, granted, there have been times in our nation's history where there has been a draft, and even then, there's plenty of examples of those whose draft numbers were not coming up, and yet they still voluntarily enlisted because they desired to do the right thing no matter how hard it was to do. Now, there have been many, and I think especially within World War II, many who would even fake their age or lie about their age in order that they could serve. The example that comes to mind is that of Calvin Graham, where after the attack on Pearl Harbor at the age of 12, he enlisted in the Navy. He would later be wounded in the Battle of Guadalcanal when he would be hit by shrapnel while he was tasked with reloading anti-aircraft guns. Now, even though he was hit by shrapnel and wounded, he still helped drag to safety those who had suffered more severe injuries than himself. Because of his bravery that day, he received the Bronze Star and a Purple Heart, and all of this at the age of 12. After the battle, later when his ship was in port for repairs, he would go AWOL to attend his grandmother's funeral, and when the authorities came looking for him, his mother revealed his true age, and as a result he would spend 3 months in the brig. When his sister threatened to take his story to the newspapers, he was released, and then he would be discharged 2 days shy of his 13th birthday. After being discharged, instead of going back to school, he worked as a welder at a defense plant, still helping with the war effort in any way he could. Even though the war had come to a conclusion before he reached the age eligible for enlistment, at the age of 17, in 1948, he would enlist again with the Marines this time and serve for 3 years until he fell from a pier and suffered a broken back. I know that many of you who are listening to this podcast would share in this sentiment, but I wish every 12-year-old boy in our nation had the kind of heart and the kind of courage and the kind of responsibility that Calvin Graham had. Not that I want 12-year-old boys enlisting in the military, but rather to have that kind of a love for their country and a love for their fellow man and a desire to do the right thing no matter how hard it is. How blessed would our country be if we had this kind of character among our young people today? Well, that gives a great responsibility upon us as parents. I've got young children. My oldest is 13, and I have been doing my best to teach them to be responsible and to teach them to do the right thing no matter how hard it is. Just as that example with that wonderful, sweet dog that they wanted desperately to keep them for themselves. At the end of the day, it makes me very proud as a father to know that they understood that it's better to be responsible and do what is right no matter how hard it is, rather than simply give in to what we desire in the moment. Doing the right thing is a wonderful thing, even when it's the hard thing to do. And we have many other examples that we can think of. For example, defending the Second Amendment. It's not an easy battle. We are engaged in an uphill battle every step of the way as we face an onslaught of foes who wish to destroy this right. It isn't just their desire to ban certain kinds of weapons or ban guns that look scary. No, there are those who wish to completely and totally disarm us as a people. And it's a difficult battle. It's one that there's times where even the most ardent of supporters might feel that it's too tough of a fight, and they might even be tempted to walk away from it. But we should always continue to engage in doing the right thing, no matter how hard it is. Then we think of the right to life and defending the sanctity of life from conception to natural death. It would be so easy to give in to the pressures that we are faced with by our secular culture. It would be far easier to remain silent on this matter, rather than face the onslaught of those within the abortion industry, those proponents of the slaughter of the unborn, who label us as misogynists, as those who hate women, as people who should be wiped off the planet. Yes, there has been those who have argued for the extinction of the pro-life movement and those who support it. But we can't be silent, not for a moment. Life is far too precious, and we should never be cowed out of fear into being silent. And now brings us to perhaps one of the most difficult things, proclaiming the gospel. It isn't easy to proclaim the gospel in the public square, for we are often faced with attacks from forces that wish to silence all Christian voices. While yes, we still have the freedom to proclaim the gospel within the confines of the church, we are called as Christians to not keep the gospel to ourselves, but to share it with the world. Again, it would be easy to be silent, to hide our faith, to not open ourselves up to vulnerability for ridicule, rejection, and mistreatment. That would be so easy. But would it be the right thing to do? No, it wouldn't. Oftentimes, what is the right thing to do is the hard thing to do. As you contemplate the freedoms that we are so blessed to enjoy, as you celebrate our country and the gifts that we have, not just as citizens of this country, but as citizens of the kingdom of heaven, I pray that you would always desire to do the right thing, no matter how hard it is. Thanks for listening. God's peace to you, and we'll talk to you the next time.
John Bennett is the pastor at St. John's Lutheran Church in Willow Creek, Minnesota. For more information, visit stjohnswillowcreek.org. For show notes, be sure to visit our website at www.armedlutheran.us. Check out the Facebook page, The Armed Lutheran, or join our Facebook group, Fans of Armed Lutheran Radio. If you like what you hear, please leave us a comment on our feedback page at armedlutheran.us/feedback or a review on iTunes and let us know what you think. Thank you for listening to Armed Lutheran Radio, a member of the Self-Defense Radio Network.